Okay, so in order to be able to factor this expression here, we have 4xy plus 12xy squared minus 16x cubed y. So whatever type of expression it is, you want to look for a common factor. And a common factor is something that they all have in common. So here, 4, 12, and negative 16 can all be divided by 4. So that's one of the common factors, but then you have to look at the variables. We have 1x here, 1x here, and 3x's here. So I can also take out an x for each term. Now, if we look at the y, 2 y's, and the 1 y, we can only take out 1 from each expression, or each term. So my common factor becomes 4xy. You put the common factor in the front, and then you say 4xy divided by 4xy is 1. Positive 12 divided by 4 is positive 3. There are no more x's left, but since I only took out 1 y from 2 y's, there's still a y left over. Negative 16 divided by 4 is negative 4. X to the power of 3 divided by x means that I took out 1 x from x to the power of 3. So that means there's x to the power of 2 left, and y divided by y means that there are no more y's left. And this is all you can do from this point. So in this example, it is just common factoring. Now if I go to the second example here for x squared plus 13x plus 40, this is a trinomial. We have to look for a common factor, and there aren't any. So in this, at this point here, we have to trinomial factor, which means we need to look to a number that multiplies to 40, but adds up to 13. So what numbers multiply to 40? Well, we've got 4 times 10, but none of this can happen to be 13, because 4 plus 10 is 14, 4 minus 10 is negative 6, and 10 minus 4 is 6. There's no way this can happen. Negative 10 minus 4 is negative 14. So none of these work. There's got to be other factors that multiply to 40. So then we look at 8 times 5. 8 times 5 is 40. 8 plus 5 is 13. So we know that this works. So my two numbers are 8 and 5. Because there's a 1 in front of your function, you can just open up two brackets and write x plus 8, since the first factor is positive 8, and the second factor is positive 5, so we go x plus 5. From here, there's nothing else you can do. This is completely factored. To expand, you would just do FOIL, or multiply each term by the next. We'd have x times x, which is x squared, x times 5, which is 5x, 8 times x, which is 8x, and then 8 times 5, which is 40. You can simplify the middle, and this gives you the original expression that you had. So expanding is the opposite operation of factoring. But this is what I was looking for right here. This is factoring. So that's a simple trinomial factoring. Another good example would be difference of squares. So whenever you have an expression that is not only to the power of 4, you can have one to the power of 2, and you can expand this in two brackets. So you say, what times what gives us x to the power of 4? Well, x to the power of 2 times x to the power of 2. And then you say, what times what gives me 16? That's the same number. Well, 4 times 4 gives me 16. Because there's a negative, the only possible signs that will multiply and give me a negative is a negative and a positive. Now, it doesn't matter if you put the positive first or the negative at the end, but here you have to recognize that there's another difference of squares. So difference of squares means that you can do the square root of both terms and split them up with the same numbers. So what times what gives me x squared? X times x. What times what gives me 4? That's the same number, 2 times 2. And to get a negative, you need to multiply by a positive and a negative. So this is called a difference of squares, and I'd like you to go back to the content and look at that a little bit more so that you can explore those types of factoring. And then we have factoring by grouping. So when you have 4 terms, you're able to factor by grouping. So what that means is that we'll have to group them up in such a manner that we can factor them properly. So let's see if this works. What the content does is basically splits up the first 2 terms, and then it splits up the last 2 terms. From here, you look for a common factor between the first 2 terms. Well, there's a common factor of y. Y isn't common for the first and the second term. So I put y in the front, and I say what's left? Well, 2xy divided by y is 2x. Or you can say y times what will give you 2xy. Y times 2x will give us 2xy. Y divided by y is 1. It's not nothing here. Make sure you put a 1. The second brackets, you would have a common factor of negative 2. So when we take out a negative 2, we have positive 2x, and negative 2 divided by negative 2 is positive 1. And what I want you to notice here is that 2x plus 1 and 2x plus 1 is common. So you're going to write that only once in one bracket, and you write down what's left, y minus 2, following that. So you know that factoring by grouping works here since this bracket matches this bracket. If that doesn't work, you've got to try some other type of factoring. So the last one we've got is a complex trinomial factoring, 3x squared plus 4x minus 4. So in this case here, we have to look for a number that multiplies to negative 12 this time, but adds up to positive 4. So don't forget the number in the front. So 3 times negative 4 is negative 12, and the number in the middle is positive 4. So there's a couple options for what multiplies to negative 12. We've got negative 12 and 1. We've got 6 and 2. We've got 4 and 3. But we've got to manipulate this to be able to get 4. At the same time, we need to manipulate this expression to get negative 12. So negative 12 times 1, negative 12 plus 1 gives me negative 11. That doesn't work. If we switch the negative around, 12 minus 1 is positive 11. And I'm not allowed to put 2 negatives, otherwise I'm going to get a positive 12. So this one is out. 6 and 2. Well, we need a negative somewhere because 6 times 2 is positive 12. We need negative 12. So if you take a look, if you need 4, I can manipulate 6 and 2 by saying 6 minus 2. That means I have a positive in front of the 6 and a negative in front of the 2. So those are my two numbers, 6 and negative 2. So I'm going to rewrite this. Basically decomposing, that's what this is called. Doesn't matter the order. I basically just decomposed my 4x. 4x is positive 6x minus 2x. So from there, you're going to do factoring by grouping. So the first 2 terms are going to be factored, and the last 2 terms are going to be factored. So we say, what's the common factor between 3x squared and 6x? Well, 3x is a common factor. So I take out the 3x, and there's an x plus 2 left over. Plus 2. Here I'm going to take out a negative 2, and I'm going to see that if I divide both terms by negative 2, I have an x left over here, because negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1. Negative 4 divided by negative 2 is positive 2. As you notice, x plus 2 is common. I'm going to rewrite that and rewrite what's left around it. You open up another bracket and you rewrite 3x minus 2. So that's it from there. So this is factoring a complex trinomial. Now the only other type of factoring that I would give you would be in the last content. Okay, if you have any cubic factoring. For an example, x cubed plus 9x squared, and then plus 20x. Remember what I said, you always have to look for a common factor before you start doing anything. And in this case, we have a common factor of x, where you can divide each term by x. I can't take out more than 1 because there's only 1 over here. So I'm going to put the common factor in the front. X squared is left, plus 9x plus 20. From here, we have to look at what's inside the bracket and see if we can factor this. Well, since there's a 1 here, 1 times 20 is 20. And we have to make it add up to 9. The only factors of 20 that will multiply to 20 and add up to 9 would be 5 times 4, which gives me positive 20, so that works. And 5 plus 4 gives me positive 9. So I open up two brackets. I don't have to do decomposition here because there's a 1 in front. It's simple trinomial factoring. So because my numbers are 5, positive 5, and positive 4, I'm going to write x plus 5 and x plus 4, and this is the final answer. So just remember that you have to look for common factor first. That's really important, always. So look for common factoring. That's the first thing you want to do. And then you have to look if you have trinomial factoring, if it's simple, or if it's complex. Trinomial factoring. Then you have to look at if you have factoring by grouping. And then the last type of factoring would be your difference of squares. So that's when you've got two terms and a minus in the middle. So two expressions that can be squared, and an expression with a subtraction. So hopefully this helps and you can get this done and over with for assignment 3 and get right on to assignment 4. Let me know if you need more help.